All right, Hans, we've done it. Welcome, everyone, to the Calling All Men Summit. This has been a long time coming. We have been talking about this sort of thing, Hans and I, as we've traveled the world. Hans, you and I have traveled all over the world the last 5 years, mostly together, but both of us been traveling the world for about 15 years, and we both feel very strongly about brotherhood
Mm.
and gathering men together. Hans, welcome.
Welcome thank you for having me. And yeah, I'm excited to see what we can create here and who's going to show up at the gathering.
Yeah, so anyone who doesn't know, today is the first day of a 7-day online men's summit. We are confronting the crises of boys and men, and we are facing it. Men and boys today are really in it. And if you've not registered for this event yet, you can simply go to callingallmensummit.com, or Hans, you can put your link there in the chat, in the
Hmm.
comments. Um, Go and register for that event because today, going live, the speakers we have today, I actually want to share my screen and just give you an idea. We're going to do some live broadcasts. We're going to be talking to Frederick Marks of Warrior Films here in just a few minutes. We're going to be talking to Simon Smart of Warrior Protocol a little bit later. And I want to show you the men that we're talking to over on the website. Going to load that up here. Let's see. All right. Yes. Let's see how this goes. So,
Great.
all right. Yeah, so we have this is the first day of the summit. We have Dan Doty. He's a three-time guest on the Joe Rogan Experience. He was a star of the cable show Meat Eater. And he's passionate about fatherhood and training men for fatherhood. Fatherhood is a rite of passage. We
Mm.
have Dr. Warren Farrell, author of The Boy Crisis and The Father Solution. And Warren Farrell's kind of the godfather of the men's movement. He's been confronting a lot of these men's issues for the last 30 plus years, perhaps 40 years, perhaps
Mm.
more. But he's an octogenarian. He's one of our elders in the program. Yeah, go check out my conversation with him. Stephen Jenkinson, an elder who talks about he talks about a lot. But he talks about in his talk I'm interviewing him about, the title is Elder Wisdom for Troubled Times.
Mm.
Stephen is very passionate about calling men to elderhood, calling us to get present to confronting our own death
Hmm.
as a means of um, being fully present and fully aware, fully awake in this life right now, and showing up
Mm.
for our people and for future generations. We've got Adam Jackson, a co-founder of Sacred Sons. Uh, he and I talked about brotherhood and fatherhood. What they're doing with Sacred Sons is a pretty fascinating movement that sprung up, I think, just in the last 5 years. I think it's mostly a millennial phenomenon. But yeah, brothers, uncles, men joining forces and really healing the divides, the isolation among men. We've got Ben Pekulski, who is a
Mm.
former um, bodybuilding champion and on the Mr. Olympia stage, the top 10 Mr. Olympia contestants. He's yeah, he's a really powerful trainer in for men, getting their fitness together and
Mm.
boosting their testosterone to healthy levels. But he and I talked mostly about fatherhood. He's really passionate about
Awesome.
fatherhood. It was a beautiful conversation. And then John Papola, he is the founder and host of a new YouTube program called Dad Saves America. And yeah, John is also very, very passionate about fatherhood. We had a great conversation, and he's a huge advocate of men becoming fathers as like just the way forward. We talked to some guy named Michael Sky.
Oh no, he's the odd one in the bunch here.
Bit of a shady character, if I do say so. Hans, you interviewed me for that conversation.
Yes, and it's very good. And we joke about it too, but yeah, I think it's your role is pivotal in that in this, and then you also have a voice in these matters. So I think it's great interview.
Yeah, the title of my talk is "When Fathers Are Absent and Elders Vanish." And then we're talking with Cliff Brooks. Cliff is a friend of mine who is a very passionate man. He's a trainer of men and fathers. He lost his dad early in life. Dad was overworking himself, and just one day he just disappeared from the earth and from Cliff's life as a young man. So he's very passionate about men honoring their health and their physical fitness. If nothing else, then to be around for your kids and your grandkids, and to be that presence and that elder in their lives. What do you think about that lineup, Hans?
I'm very excited. You know, I know well all of them, but I would love to, go a little bit deeper. I think you introduced it well, because I would like to hear a bit more from each one. And where can how do people know when this is all day one? Okay. So
yeah, this is day one, and then day two we're talking about raising strong sons, right? Raising our boys to be men, and we have a bunch more powerful men that we're talking to. If you're looking in the comments right now, Hans posted a link to this summit website. You can go and register for free. You can watch all the 50 talks this week as they come out Monday through this coming
talks.
Sunday. And
when
then
Michael does something, he does it right. 50 talks.
And then right here, we're broadcasting from our Calling All Men Facebook page, facebookpage.com/calling all men. Let me put this up on the screen here. Yes. Put a little, no, maybe it was already up there. That thing scrolling across the bottom, facebook.com/calling all men summit.
Yes.
And if you go and like the page, then you should get notified when we go live later today, throughout the rest of the week, and upcoming things after that. So yeah, go to our Facebook page. Also, when you go there to watch this live broadcast, when you type in the comments, we can actually see who's commenting, and we can interact with you. So invite your interaction. Just a few minutes.
I'll say something more about this. If you're watching on any other platform, for example, my Facebook or YouTube or one of Michael's, then we put the link there so you would come to the Facebook page, because only when you're on the Facebook page and when you're watching it there will you'll be able to interact with us, and we'll see who's commenting. So if you want to say something, come to the Facebook page.
Yeah, and invite everyone to tag a brother, tag a brother in the comments, invite maybe a single dad, a divorced dad, someone who maybe experienced loneliness throughout the holidays, or, a young man who's trying to make his way in the world, a brother, someone you care about, could be your father, Give a man a tag there in the comments. Let him know, hey, men are gathering.
Yes.
And yeah, in this way, go back for a brother.
Speaking
Reach
of
into him.
which,
Go ahead, Hans.
I talked. Yeah, I just want to let you know this. I talked yesterday to our friend Anthony, the young kid who, at 17 was, yeah, d- experiencing the angst that a lot of American teenagers experience. And we're a couple of years later now, and he said yesterday, um, I rewatched. He says I rewatched uh, the videos that Michael and you made back in 2020 when we did the Ronin radio videos back from Brazil, and he said back then it didn't ring so true. I couldn't make sense of it. Now it does, and he says, and I've been here for the past 9 months. He's been living in Brazil for the past 9 months and totally loving it. He's in a small, a small town, not Rio, but he's been living there, man, and he's completely reinventing himself and yeah, living his life away from what gave him a lot of angst and trouble. So it's fantastic to hear it.
Yeah, Hans and I've been as we travel the world, we call men to adventure. In today's world, there's no reason you can't go out and have whatever kind of adventure your heart seeks. There's no reason, why your whole life can't be a grand adventure and why it can't be full of brothers, like real brotherhood. Hans and I are allies. We have each other's back. The term brother means something. Hey, Rob, I see you, brother. Rob's our friend from Bucharest, Romania.
Yes.
So, Hans, let's just pause for a second. Frederick, we see you in the lineup here. We'll let you on the screen in a second, but if in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, if you wanted to add your Facebook page or a YouTube page or channel to the stream, to the broadcast, you do that in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, probably above and to the right of the video screen that you see. If you can't hook that up or you're not going to hook it up, it's all good. We'll be bringing you on in just a minute. And
Yeah,
also, Frederick, on the right hand of the video screen there, where it says people, there's a little button there. We can chat amongst ourselves. So if you have any issues, let us know. Hans?
Yeah, I was just going to give a shout out to Rob, who's he's an English guy, and he moved to Romania, and he's creating a community there. It started with a hostel, but it's way became a real social place, And I've been there, and I've lived in the community there, and it's amazing, how many. I always tell him how many lives he's saving just by creating that community and having a space that's welcoming, not just for men, but women also, but just someone who takes charge, and is creating community in a little place somewhere in the world. And I think it's fantastic. So yeah, I wanted to give a shout out to Rob.
Yes. So if you're just joining us, the 8 men on the screen here to the right of Hans and I, these are the speakers over at the website. You can attend the full summit for free. Click the link in the comments that Hans posted. You can watch all of today's speakers. And yes. All right. Why don't we bring on Mr. Marks? Frederick Marks, welcome.
Good to see you, man. I am in the midst of techno hell, trying to figure out how I can log into my Facebook and other sites to stream this live.
Do you see the option to do that?
I do, but I have to set up a log. Here, I just got my login code.
All right.
So let me see if I can now go back and finish logging in and be fully present.
Great. We'll bring you back on stage in a minute. Keep doing what you're doing, and we'll bring you back in a minute.
Okay.
Oh, I kicked him out.
Oh no, he's back.
Okay, Frederick,
Right.
I thought I kicked you out there for a second. I hope not. Okay, he's back. All right. Yeah, Hans, you and I are doing this streaming. I mean, unless you count Facebook live stream. So Hans and I, when the pandemic was coming on in early 2020, I was in Kenya. Hans was in Spain. Was it the capital, or were you in Malaga?
I was in Malaga. We had just seen each other in Morocco. I remember that.
Yeah.
And you said there's this virus they're talking about. And I said, what are you talking about?
Hans is notorious for not keeping up with world events. And I'm like, Hans, the sky is collapsing. Civilization is over. And he's like, yeah. And I told him for days, and he's ignoring it. Then he gets a notification that he's not going to be allowed to ride his bicycle on the street in the city anymore. And then he's panicked. He's like, you're right.
That was it. I remember you told me the weekend, and I was like, yeah, whatever. We go back from Morocco to Spain on the Tuesday. I'm still not paying attention. By Saturday, Spain is like closing down, and they say on Sunday, tomorrow, you're not allowed to ride your bike outside anymore. I go, what? I go into panic mode. By Tuesday, as they are closing airports, we were out and we met in Brazil for a couple of months.
Yes, to wrap that up, we did a broadcast there every morning called Ronin Radio. We were reaching out to our brothers. All right. Looks like Mr. Marks has figured out the live stream.
I'm still adding various pages, but yes.
Oh, great. Well, we got the Warrior Films page. So anyone watching us from Frederick's Warrior Films Facebook page, welcome. And Frederick, why don't you keep doing what you're doing there? And I'm going to give you a nice little introduction. And
okay. Yeah, I seem to have reached the max of pages that I can add. We have like 5 or 6 different identities just on Facebook alone. So I've added what seems to be the max of 3, my personal one, Warrior Films, and then my Boys Become Men page. So
awesome.
I'll try to add some others though while you're introducing me.
If you can try, I don't know how many they'll let you add as a guest, but invite them all. Yeah.
Well, I was going to try on other things like YouTube and Twitter and the like. So, but it probably won't work.
Yeah, go ahead and try it, and whatever, we may find an upgrade for tomorrow because you're going to be back with us tomorrow. So Frederick Marks, for those who don't know him, is an Academy and Emmy-nominated filmmaker, most known for Hoop Dreams, named the best documentary of all time by the International Documentary Association. He has worked 45 years in the film and television business. That's almost longer than Hans has been alive. His film Journey from Zanskar features the Dalai Lama with narration by Richard Gere. His 5-film miniseries, Veterans Journey Home, is now complete and in worldwide distribution. Other works, the feature film The Unspoken, starring Harry Lennox and Sergei Shnerev, the documentary miniseries Boys to Men and Rites of Passage, all express deep concerns about teen boys realizing mature masculinity. So powerful. And I hope we're going to get a chance to watch some of your films, Frederick. I'm not sure we can hook it up in this live stream, but we could at least show it in the on the Facebook page, and we'll figure out something there. But his books, At Death Do Us Part, Rights to a Good Life, and Turds of Wisdom, have recently been published. Turds of Wisdom. Yes. All right. Herds of Wisdom. There it is. On bookshelves now. You might just need to use your air freshener a bit more when you read that book. A Chicago Tribune Artist of the Year, a Guggenheim Fellow, and a recipient of the Robert F. Kennedy Special Achievement Award. You can find him at IMDb, Wikipedia, and warriorfilms.org. Frederick, welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah. So
I took one look at what you guys were wearing tonight and thought, well, I don't know that I need to put on any special shirt. This looks, what I'm wearing is just fine.
yes, just men gathering around the campfire, as it were. But in this case, the campfire is the screen.
Well, you look like you're more dressed for the jungle. So
Yeah. Well, I'm doing this broadcast from Kenya, and I moved into a kind of a modern apartment complex, so it would have high speed internet, so I could do the show. But then the problem is, I really don't look like I'm in Africa anymore. So I did. I at least I brought in some a little bit of greenage for the background, but I don't know how much it makes people think I'm in Africa.
well, you got the right shirt though.
Yeah. So, Frederick, you're passionate about this topic, men, the challenges that we're facing. Let me ask you, what's most personal to you? Like, how does this touch you the most? The crises of our men and boys today.
Well, you mean in a very immediate sense, like right this minute, or do you mean historically, sort of my life evolution?
Either or both.
Well, I guess the simplest way to start. Oh, there's a K on the end of my name there too. You might want to add if you can.
Sure.
Was where I typically start when I give public talks. And that is to say that, in a sense, this journey for me began when I was 9. And my father died very suddenly of a heart attack. And I never had a chance to say goodbye. He was there at night. I said goodnight. And then the next morning I woke up and he was gone forever. So he literally vanished out of my life. And it was only later, many years later, in fact, that I learned some of the details of what had actually happened. But on the way to the funeral, a couple days later, he was 41 years old too, by the way. So my uncle, his younger brother, he put his hand on my shoulder and he said, well, Freddie, you're the man of the house now. So, it's easy these days to say how inappropriate statements like that are. But you better believe that I very much wanted to be that man. I wanted to support my mother in ways that I could, and I wanted to be a man to my older sister and younger brother. And I had no clue how to do that, as any 9-year-old would. So he didn't stick around to show me. None of my father's colleagues at the University of Illinois, where he was a professor, showed up to show me. None of the neighbors, none of the fathers in the neighborhood showed up for me. And so I was left wondering, how the hell do I become the man I want to be? How do I get there? And like a lot of young people, I tried to cobble together some kind of working image of masculinity that I could live into. And I'm just going to click away from seeing myself on the screen, which is highly distracting. So, I pulled little pieces from here and there, sometimes from popular media, sometimes from reading, sometimes from close observation of the men who I did come into contact with. But like a lot of teens, I desperately needed not only mentorship, men to show up for me, but also I needed initiation. I wanted to transition meaningfully out of adolescence into young adulthood, and I had no fucking clue how to get there. So, like a lot of teens, I unconsciously reached for self-initiation, which is how I understand teens and their sometimes extreme behaviors, pushing the limits of this physical body, of this mental body, this spiritual body, this emotional body, to try to see what the fuck is it capable of. And that's all unconscious, right? But that's why, as young men, so many of us ask ourselves, well, geez, I wonder if I can't drink 2 cases of beer and then drive 90 miles an hour through my neighborhood. Let's find out, right? Or some other expression of pushing the body and the mind to its limits, because that's all an unconscious need to, yes, understand what those limits are, but also in a sense to come into proximity with death, which, as I've learned, is one of the key components of an effective rite of passage. So I'm already getting into all of that, but let me just finish that and come back to my story. So nobody showed up for me, and I struggled to sort of put together some composite image of masculinity. And it was interesting too, because I found myself, and I only understood this later, unconsciously drawn to the company mostly of women and gay men, because I felt unconsciously like my emotional life, my rich interior, heartful life would be welcome and accepted in that company. And I mostly pushed back against kind of identification and relationship with type A males, who I tended to project all of the worst shadow aspects of my own father onto. So I didn't really feel comfortable remotely in the company of men until 2 weeks before my 40th birthday. I ended up doing the Mankind Project New Warrior Training Adventure in Chicago. And that changed my life completely. It changed my personal life, yes, but it also changed my professional life and became the direction for much of my work for the last almost 30 years now. So that day, 40 men showed up for me. And that day, those men helped me understand and live into how to become the man I wanted to be. And they affirmed for me some of the things that I already intuitively knew, things like accountability and integrity, how to be a man of honor. But they taught me the tools to make that possible and not just have it be some kind of abstract aspiration. But they also taught me a number of other things that were new to me. And in particular, one of them was how to not only more deeply familiarize myself with my rich interior emotional life, but to accept it and then utilize it to harness all of those energies that are flowing inside of me, and not hide, repress, and deny them, but actually to utilize them in effective ways. And they also taught me about shadow. And they held up a pretty fierce mirror to me so I could look in and discover, well, you know what? Maybe in some ways I'm not all that different from the dark side of my father. And I can learn to understand and accept those sides of myself too.
Mm.
So that was huge as well. So maybe the bottom line lesson was the greatest one of all, which was, how is it possible to live in a community of men, to actually understand and appreciate and live into the social construct of a real working brotherhood, and not recognize men as competitors, as people that I have to fear or dominate in some way because they're going to compete with me for scarce resources. So
Yeah, competitors in a really win-lose sense, or in a survival sense, right?
yes.
I mean, Hans and I are extremely competitive personally and with each other, but we're totally brothers, you know. It's not like I'm not going to compete him out of having food that day, or out of the female that he's interested in, or whatever. Yeah.
Right, but that's what society teaches us, though, right? In a sense, you know, I mean, well, call it the capitalist ethic then, if you prefer, right? But that we are in fierce competition, you know, it's the Darwinian survival of the fittest, and that we have to dominate, you know, other men in order to get women, in order to get food, shelter, and etc. Right? And I'm obviously extremely bottom lining this and not talking, you know, more about sort of the practicalities of everyday interactions. But yeah, and that was huge for me. And so it opened a window for me into seeing men who in the past I would have been intimidated by and run away from, again, projecting all the worst aspects. Oh, they're all about domination themselves. All they want to do is subjugate me, right? I could see into their own beating, tender hearts. And so it was really interesting because it flipped the paradigm for me. So that for a while, actually, I so loved and relished the company of men. You know, it was just like being someone walking through a desert who finally gets to the oasis and can drink. And so I got to the point where, for a number of years, even though I still had lovers and my girlfriends and lived, you know, in deep relationship with them, but I would spend as much time as possible with men, and felt more, in a sense, empathetic to them. So again, sort of reversing that paradigm that I had grown up with.
Mm-hmm.
So I like to think now that I'm almost 70, that I actually have a fairly good balance of acceptance around men and women, and see them all as frail, tender human beings in their own different ways. So I could go on, but that's my story in a nutshell.
I wonder how many men are out there right now who can really relate to the first part of that story. You know, I grew up in the Mormon religion, a lot of connection, warm, beautiful, loving connection to men and to elders and brothers and this sort of thing. But when I went to the public high school, and in the neighborhood kids, it was that kind of competitive aspect where it's like they want to put you down. You know, you don't you know, I mean, I didn't have a place among them. I was a loner. I felt isolated. And I wonder what I would have done had I not, in my home life, in my family life, in my community, my religious community, if I had not had that connection to brothers, father, elders. I mean, I wonder how many men out there who only experience the connection to other men as something cold and dangerous and then are denying, parts of themselves, right? The parts of themselves that they judge in other men. I imagine it's a lot.
Well, and bless you, you're extremely fortunate. You in a sense grew up and were given access to entry into the world of men, in a very literal sense. And I was not. And I think that there's a lot of men like me out there, like you're alluding to, who were not. And I can also drill down into some of the details about how that happened and what it meant for me, because I had an older sister and a very feminist mother.
Mm-hmm.
So well, I don't know. Do you want to go into this now?
Sure.
Okay. Well,
let's talk about feminist mothers.
Okay. Well, it's interesting because, the Time's Up movement, which whenever that started, 6, 7, 8 years ago, for me began in the 60s. So I was taught, and schooled that I had to be very, very careful around women to not risk not only offending them, but in some way violating them, and not in a dramatic physical sense of rape, but in the sense of social space, in the sense of social manners, So this ideology fed in very directly into my own fears and insecurities around relating to women or girls. Is when it started in grade school. And so what happened for me was that I basically needed a girl, a woman, to almost throw herself into my arms before I would in any way assume that it was safe to accept her love and be in relationship with her. Because otherwise, I was an unconscious aggressor who was imposing my male, well, now we use the term privilege, right? My male privilege on her in ways that were potentially offensive, aggressive, and violating. So that's how it manifested in my life. And, to some degree, well, I've been very, very lucky, and I have a wonderful relationship now with a wonderful woman. But I historically have lived out that way. I mean, I am not the kind of guy, for example, even when I was single, to be attracted to a woman in a bar or some kind of social setting and go up and talk to her. No, that in itself was aggressive, because who am I to assume that she in any way would welcome a stranger coming into her proximity?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So anyway, so that whole sociology, which has sort of landed now on the entirety of men over the last 7, 8, 10 years, this awareness, I grew up in that.
Yeah. And it's magnified now because of the internet and social media. It's almost as if we live in one huge community. And I think a lot of the culture wars and the escalation of aggression and fighting is because everyone's trying to assert what are the rules of this international community, And I mean, that's all well and good. Like if you have a family or if you have a small community, but trying to get the entire human population to agree to a set of certain standards is only going to lead to what it's leading to. But there are so many men who do. They don't grow up around men or brothers. And Frederick, in the U.S., there's very few all men spaces now. You mentioned the Mankind Project, but feminists have viewed that over the years as some kind of male privilege domination thing, that men have all male spaces. And so they've just about all been given up. And so men no longer even have a space amongst other men, where they can kind of just relax and breathe and realize what it is to be a man again.
It's very true.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very true. And they're most needed. Men do need safe spaces where they and they alone can come together and let down their hair. And be
It'll be kind of hard for you, Frederick.
Well, I'll let down my beard to be in the company of men, and I understand the reasons for that. Historically, when men would go off together and spend time together, it could often mean potential eventual harm for women, right? It could mean that, they're drinking, and then they're going to come back and they're going to act out, right? And women and children will be harmed. I get it. But that kind of thinking is outdated, to say the least. And we need, as you point out, to rewrite the rules of engagement, so that one of those key rules is we need to understand it's not a zero-sum game anymore. It's not a zero-sum game. So that things that help men to grow, and part of them is being in their safe, sacred spaces alone, is good for women and children, is good for them. We need to understand that.
Yeah, Hans, what do you think?
Yeah, I was about to say something. I spent the last month and a half here in the mountains of Medellin with two of my allies, and we called it a growth house, but we created a space that was all men, and we came together around the idea of our ambitions we have in terms of health and fitness, business, money, and also relationships. And we also came together in the sense of like, we're going to figure out ways of living together. We're going to be in, we're going to find rules that we all can agree on how clean it has to be, who does what. And it was, again, a reminder for me of how much I love, need, yearn for, to have that in my life on a regular basis, to just be in that container, because how right it feels, and how productive, and how would I say, healing it is to be in that space. And it was nothing else but them being there, and me being with them, and just spend that month and a half in the finca, on the farm, and working out, doing work, and talking a lot, and fighting a bit, and fighting gracefully. And it was just so, it feels so right. It feels so much like home. And it isn't until I experience those things that I realize how a big part of me is yearning for that, on a daily basis. It's so important to have that all male space, to be able to be among men, to be able to talk locker room talk, so to speak, and there's a time and space for that, for sure. I experienced it, I need it and I love it.
Frederick, you were your life was transformed through your experience in the Mankind Project. And then after that, you said you found a lot of comfort and solace in groups of men, or maybe even more comfortable amongst men. And then you went on to, with your film career, you've kind of taken up some activism here, particularly geared more towards the younger men or the boys. We'll probably talk more about that tomorrow, but why don't you fill us in on the rest of your story there, what you've done with some of your films around rites of passage.
Yeah, well, for me, the question that lived in me in the wake of Hoop Dreams' success. So, that film came out around the time that I was 40, around the exact same time that I did the Mankind Project weekend. And so those two pieces sort of came together in a way. So the question that lived in me was, what adults, in particular, what men are there to support teens? And our film, Hoop Dreams, is about two teens. Basically, we filmed them for 4.5 years from the time that they left grammar school all the way through high school and then their first steps into college. So what parents, what adults are there to support young men across this threshold into discovering who they are as young men, and are doing it for altruistic reasons, because they want to see them grow into the greatest human beings they can be, and who are not there to exploit them. Because the young men that we focused on in our film had tremendous basketball talent. And so a lot of people around them recognize that talent, and they recognize they could be future NBA stars and therefore wealthy men with influence and power and money that they themselves might access. So in a sense, I saw in different ways a lot of the men circling around these young boys as predators. How can they exploit them for their own ends, in effect? So that opened this question for me. Well, who's doing that anymore? Is anyone doing that? And how is it happening? So the first step for me was a couple of years later, I moved to Newark, New Jersey. I was living in California before, and I started working on my TV miniseries, Boys to Men, ? And I started asking 15 and 16-year-old boys, I said, who the hell is there for you? And what are they doing to help you across this threshold? So I would love to share with you even just a 2-minute section of the miniseries, but these boys all in their own different ways. And it was interesting because it was a beautiful rainbow of boys across race, across class, across family structure, some with both parents, some with only their mother, and some with only their dad. Inner city kids, suburban kids. I mean, it was beautiful. But almost to a boy, every one of them articulated some of these same themes over and over again. How do I navigate my relationships with girls? How do I deal with these surging, raging hormones? How do I deal with peer pressure? And in a sense, what was underlying all of these questions, how do I become the man that I want to be in this life? So that mini series is still out there and actually is still reaching a lot of people. But I realized half the way through that making it in a sense, was a portrait of the problem. It showed boys' thirst and needs and how very few people were showing up to meet them. So I realized then and there I have to make a sequel. I have to make a film about the solutions. And in fact, over the last 20 years now, I've been focused on making films and writing books about solutions. What works? What is out there? What already exists? What structures, what mechanisms that support, in this case, boys transitioning into men? So then I got into rites of passage, and on it went.
Up until this day, right? I mean, you're still heavily invested in supporting young people through rites of passage. Don't you? You have an organization for that, right?
Well, no. I mean, my company, Warrior Films, is a small nonprofit. So the way I explain to people who I am and what we do, we don't have programs. Okay, so we're not, in a sense, on the ground initiating teams ourselves. What I do is create what I hope are powerful stories that illustrate solutions that might be off people's radar, and to try to move them into an acceptance of new ideas and new ways of thinking. So I'm all about changing minds, changing the way they think. I'm not about, again, sort of on the ground with programs. But having said that, I do feel like, you know, we have generated a number of tools for people to support young people across this threshold. So let me just briefly mention some of those tools. One, we have 6 different toolkits or curricula where we talk about the necessity to initiate and mentor teens. And by the way, I see mentorship as one half of what is a whole. Initiation and mentorship are 2 halves of one whole, okay? They're both essential, and for boys and girls. And by the way, too, I also do practice mentorship. I mean, I love mentorship. And not being a father myself, I get to put all of my fathering energy into mentoring younger people. So I do that on an ongoing basis, and I love that work. But anyway, back to these toolkits. So they're broken down by social sector. So if you're a parent, well, we have one for you to understand what your child may be needing and how to basically help them along through this transition. We have them for colleges, we have them for high schools, we have them for therapists, counselors, and psychologists. We have one for faith-based groups, and we have one for community groups, all with the idea of how they can understand rites of passage and actually begin to implement it with their clients or the young people in their lives. And actually, by the way, I recently started a conversation with some doctors who head up a program. Well, yeah, it's a nonprofit that basically supports teens who have cancer, some of whom have terminal diagnoses from cancer, which too, of course, is a rite of passage, right? So I've entered into a conversation, the whole purpose of which is to try to basically share with them this framework of understanding so that when they're dealing with a 15-year-old boy who's just been given a terminal diagnosis of some kind of cancer, that they can say to him something like, okay, you did not ask for this. And in many, many ways, you do not deserve this. But this is something that life has thrust upon you. And unfortunately, life does that to us. It thrusts upon us all kinds of terrible things. So you need to understand that you're now going through a rite of passage. And in a sense, what's called upon for you is to, in effect, symbolically die to some aspects of your life in order to be symbolically reborn into something new. And I, as an elder, as a supporter, as a mentor, I'm going to stand with you through this trial until you come out the other side. And hopefully you will come out the other side and survive. And I'll be with you all the way until you begin to understand what lessons are in this trial that life has thrust upon you, and begin to find some beautiful meaning within those lessons that can help drive the remainder of your life forward with clear direction and clear purpose. So
that's so beautiful.
So you know, in a sense, and again, we're maybe getting into the weeds too much, so if so, stop me. But, you know, rites of passage, in a sense, come in two broad categories, forms. So one is just life itself, right? Life itself and the trials that it thrusts upon us. And some of those trials include transitioning from adolescence into young adulthood, because that's in a sense, a physiological trial that genetics and the way that human beings have evolved has kind of forced upon us. And part of that rite of passage has to be about the young person symbolically, again, dying to that childhood notion of me, me, me. It's all about me, right? It's me and my needs. How can I get food? How can I get inebriated? How can I get sex, right? Whatever it is. And to be, again, symbolically reborn into some new way of being, which is adulthood, which is us. How can we figure this out together, cooperate and communicate effectively in order to go forward as an us, right? And you don't have to look very far around to see most of the world are uninitiated. They are not people in power and leadership and in control of our institutions who are talking about us, right? So anyway, I've of course gotten off track, but just briefly back to some of the resources that we have. So I have a number of films about this subject matter, and most of my short films we give away. You know, so I have a short film about teens talking about their need for mentorship. I have a film, Boys Become Men, about showing boys actually getting solutions, mentors, and initiatory practices showing up to help them across that transition. I also co-founded a nonprofit group called youthpassageways.org. And the whole purpose, the starting purpose at least of that group, and I stepped away from the board a few years ago, so I'm not exactly clear on all that they're doing. But my founding vision was that parents and everyone else who wanted could go to a website and could do something as simple as type in a zip code, and they would get a list of all of the organizations in their area that are doing mentorship of teens, that are doing initiation of teens, and initiation even broken down by modality. So,
what's the name of that website, Frederick?
Youthpassageways.org. So, yeah. So, you know, if your son or daughter likes, you know, being out in the mountains, great. Here's some wilderness rites of passage that might work perfectly for them. If they're averse to that, great. You know, here's some weekend workshops, you know, in 48 hours, similar in some ways to the Mankind Project. You know, we can teach you some of the fundamental lessons of what it is to become an adult. Or
let me just
go ahead.
Jump in here. Tomorrow we're going to be talking about a number of men who are helping boys become men. And some of them do these wilderness initiatory rites of passage. And Simon Smart, who we're going to be talking to later today, speaks very powerfully to this. Actually, he created a video training for us. It's quite intensive and thorough for the individual, like the guy who's out there on his own, has no brothers. Maybe there's no Mankind Project anywhere near him. How you can create your own kind of rite of passage experience from A to Z, because it is so powerful to leave that just state of me-ness, and what the world needs are more men, more adults who are going to take responsibility. Hans, let's have you jump in here as well with your question. You're muted, Hans.
I was wondering, I wanted to ask Frederick, have you seen any cultural differences in, say, the level of being initiated, like as a collective consciousness? Have you seen differences that some cultures are way more initiated than others?
Yes. But, I probably haven't seen it as closely as you two have because I'm not as well traveled in places like Africa and South America. But yes, wherever you go and you find more indigenous cultural practices still alive, still functional, is where typically you will find adults who are more initiated, right? Who understand these things. In one of my interviews, Robert Bly said to me, he said, in Africa, and this is Bly, I don't know how accurate this is, but I'm going to assume it is. He said it would be unthinkable for a person to become president or prime minister of a country who is not initiated, because the people of that country this would be an anathema to them. They couldn't wrap their heads around it. That's not an adult man. That's a boy. That's a boy who's wearing adult clothes. So they would not allow for that to happen. Anyway.
No, I just jumped in there. In Uganda, you're not a man unless you're a father, which in the context of this conversation kind of makes sense with fatherhood being an initiatory experience, right? All of a sudden you've got all this responsibility to bring up another human being, and you're going to have to let go of certain parts of yourself to step up and take that on. So yeah, and the other thing is, you're not a man if you're wearing shorts.
We don't have to take everything. But what's fascinating to me, Frederick, and I think it's beautiful, is that you articulate initiation as a transition from thinking me to us. That's fascinating to me, and it's true. When we were in the Masai Mara, I remember I was there with Michael, and I had a bottle of water, and all of a sudden I couldn't find it, and I said, "Where's my bottle of water?" And people could not comprehend that I said there's no such thing there, and I've experienced the same a lot in Asia. I think it's the feeling of belonging comes from that. When I spend time, for example, in Japan, and people think, oh, it's so crowded, and I felt very spacious, and I attribute it to this idea of people think way more in terms of us. They don't think in terms of me. And it's a complete different way of thinking. Even when you go when you go to Thailand, and the traffic seems so it seems at first very dangerous, but after a while, because everybody's moving everywhere, after a while you see there's a harmony to it, and the harmony comes from, well, I think I attribute it to the idea that they don't want to be first. They don't think just me first. They think in us, and therefore, like, after a while, and this could take 15 minutes, you start seeing that it's way less dangerous than it first appears, because people are thinking in terms of us, and it's,
if that was a bunch of Americans with a road like that and different vehicles like that, it would be dangerous as hell.
Well, and China is the same way. that's inculcated into the culture, that it's about us. So I reflect on when I lived in China from 83 to 85, getting on my bicycle was intimidating at first, because 90% of traffic, of course, at that time was bicycle. It wasn't cars. And yet, after a period of time, I began to understand it as joining the river of the community. And I would get in that river, and then, the river would go to the left and the right, but we would all sort of accommodate each other and go together. And sort of like how geese fly, I'm sure you are aware of that. They take turns at the lead, right? And so the lead goose then, after a period of time, drops back. And then somebody else takes the lead, and then they all sort of form the formation following them. So anyway, you're absolutely correct. Different cultures are already sort of partway there.
So, Frederick, we're going to bring you back with us tomorrow and maybe at other points during the week, up to you and your schedule, but we welcome you back some more. In a few minutes, we're going to go to a group Zoom call with Leonard, and he's going to walk us through a conversation about warriorship in the time of collapse. So I invite everyone to join us. Everyone who is a paid member from the Calling All Men Summit, you're going to get a lot of video trainings. A lot of the mentors we've talked with, 50 of them over on the site. Almost all of them who we talked to this week, close to 20 it should be. They're all going to come with us and do a training, do a practical training or an interactive conversation that can increase our wisdom, our connection, and help us in finding our way forward. And Frederick, maybe you can give a little bit of a sneak peek of what are we going to be talking about when we talk about warriorship in the time of collapse.
Big subject, but I'll try to give a brief overview. So collapse, first of all, is already happening around us, and all of the institutional structures that have supported our lives for the vast majority of our lives are now crumbling. Government, healthcare, legal services, you name it. So the question then comes to the fore: how do I, as an individual, deal with this? And so I've just reflected a little bit on how it's going to be essential for each of us to think through, how do I access, first of all, the warrior archetype to do what needs to be done for my own well-being and those loved ones of mine, in order to protect ourselves, because things are going to get chaotic and scary.
This sounds like an induction into elderhood, taking responsibility for all of our people, I mean, when I hear you talk about being a mentor with initiation, I mean, that's being an elder. It's, it's the father is concerned for his kids, his immediate family, but the elder is like, this is how I see it, putting your arms around even the other people in the community, or, reaching further than your direct biology, and taking responsibility there.
Yeah, well, and it gets edgy, and it will be edgy, because it's kind of it's edgy for me, and I'll talk about that. My background is all about being a pacifist. My parents raised me to be that way, and all of the learnings about life for me have underscored the importance of that. Nonviolence as a practice. And things being what they might well be in 10, 15, 20, 30 years or more, I'm thinking about, okay, I need to, for one thing, I don't have a martial arts practice and I need to get one, right? I mean, I've been a yoga practitioner for years, but that's not going to help defend me or my family.
It defends you from self-doubt and aggressive inner judgment.
To some degree, yes.
Yeah.
But anyway, so the point I'm just getting to is I'm thinking I maybe need to get trained in weapons use. You know, which for self-defense, yeah, which for me is a huge bridge to cross.
Yeah. Well, depending on where we are in the world, I mean, there are some places we are feeling more and more unsafe, and things are becoming more and more chaotic. And yeah, so let me just share with everybody
Do I have a second to run out and get water?
Sure, go ahead. So on the screen here now, this is the website where you can get access to all of the 50 conversations this week. CallingAllMenSummit.com, or Hans, you can drop your link in the comments there again. When you put your name and email in over here, click register. On the very next page, you have the option to own the whole library of interviews and all the bonus trainings and everything else. You'll see a lineup of the 50 speakers. What you won't see are the 15 to 20 live speakers we'll have right here on this Facebook page. So again, those of you who choose to support us by owning the Summit package, you'll be able to join us in this training with Frederick. And you'll also get a copy, an extra copy to give to a man in your life. So Christmas, the holidays are coming up. Think of a man in your life who you could give the gift of brotherhood and mentorship to. By giving him, you'll get the entire Summit package. He'll get all the videos, the audio, the transcripts. He'll get all the video trainings, and he'll get the community. So this is something that you can give away to another man. All right.
So Michael, people who want to imagine they haven't supported it yet, but they want to see the training, do they have time to do this now?
They have time to do it now, but they might or may not find their way to us. Yeah, to this live training. I'm gonna have to think of a workaround for that. But if you let us know in the comments that, hey, I just purchased, I want to find my way to the Zoom training, then we'll make that happen for you. We'll take you at your word that that you're an owner.
No, because I can assume, I'm assuming people who are listening to Frederick talk here that they'll be very interested to join in the next part. And so yes, I'll check the chat, and if there's anyone, I'll send it privately.
Yeah, and then we will be back in, I think it's about an hour, with Simon Smart, another man who's doing great work in the world with men. Yeah, you don't want to miss that. So we'll be right here on this this same Facebook page. We'll be streaming, and we look forward to your interaction. And remember to invite a brother, a friend in your life. Tag him in the comments. Bring them with us. All right, Hans and Frederick. So everyone, we're going to sign off, and we'll be back here in an hour.
In 1 hour.